A journalist starts investigating a young politician who's suspected of being a serial killer. But she falls in love with him, and it clouds her judgment. We'll find out what happens next in today's recap of the Hollywood thriller Scoop. Welcome back to Showbox. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Make sure to like and subscribe. The film starts in a London church during the funeral services of a famous journalist, Joe. While they're talking about him, Joe is being taken to the afterlife on a boat. And that's when he meets a woman on the boat who used to be the secretary for Lord Peter, who's a promising politician. The woman explains how she believes that Peter was the tarot card serial killer because Peter had an antique cufflink similar to the one left on the crime scene. She tried telling this to her lawyer, but someone listened to her phone call, and that evening, she died mysteriously. Joe knows that it's a big story, but sadly, he can't chase it. While he's awaiting his fate, an aspiring journalist named Sandra is interviewing a hotshot film director. She wants to get some exclusive information, so she even goes to his room and has a few drinks with him. Later on, she tells her friend Vivian how she got drunk and slept with the director, but still didn't get the interview. She's sad, so Vivian takes her to a magic show to distract her mind. While she's watching the show, Joe manages to jump off the boat. Sandra, on the other hand, is called on stage by the magician Sid, who's going to perform a magic trick. She nervously gets inside the box. During the trick, Joe's ghost appears inside the box. He tells Sandra about Peter and the tarot card killer. He tells her it's a great scoop for her career, but just then, the trick ends and he disappears. When Sid opens the box, Sandra tries to talk about what happened, but he doesn't listen to her. Still, Sandra goes home and reads about Joe and the gruesome story of the serial killer. The next day, she returns to Sid's theater and explains everything to him. He doesn't believe her, but agrees to put her inside the box again. Sandra tries calling Joe to come and explain a few things for her, but he doesn't appear. Eventually, Sid takes Sandra out and asks her to leave since he's busy. But just then, Joe appears again. He explains who Peter is and why he's a prime suspect. He tells Sandra to investigate thoroughly and to be careful since Peter can be dangerous. After this, the angel appears and takes Joe back. After watching this, Sid is scared to death. He wants Sandra to give the scoop to the police, but they don't have any proof other than the word of a dead man. So, the next day, they both wait outside Peter's office. They see him leave and follow him to an antique shop in the city. However, the man isn't Peter, and Sandra is embarrassed. Her luck finally turns when Vivian explains how Peter swims in the same club as her father. So, Sandra goes to the club with Sid and finds out that Peter is swimming. They go to the pool and spot Peter, but Sandra doesn't know how to start a conversation with him. So Sandra gets in the water and pretends to be drowning. Peter immediately grabs her and takes her out of the pool. Peter is attracted to her beauty and asks about her. Sandra gives herself a fake name and claims to be an American actress spending her summer in London. Peter invites her to a garden party on his estate. Sandra takes his offer, and before Peter leaves, she introduces him to her fake father, Sid. She then explains everything to Sid, but he doesn't like getting involved with a powerful and possibly madman. Still, he agrees to help her. A few days later, they visit Peter's estate. He greets them at the garden party and even introduces them to his father. Sid is barely keeping up the facade, and he keeps babbling on about random stuff. Peter takes them for a tour of his estate. After this, Sid starts performing card tricks for the other guests, while Peter goes for a walk with Sandra. He explains his political ambitions. He even mentions his dead secretary. Sandra tries to ask about her death, but Peter changes the subject after saying that the woman died due to a blood clot. While they're chatting, Sid looks around Peter's stuff and finds a note. Meanwhile, Peter tells Sandra that he's really into her and tries to kiss her, but doesn't succeed. After they get back, Sid shows Sandra the note, but she isn't interested in it. A few days later, Sid goes to play a poker game with Peter, who shows up quite late. The next day, Sandra is walking around with Vivian when she reads how the tarot card murderer took another life. Sid tells her that Peter showed up late for the game and he had time to commit this crime. So Sandra decides to visit Peter's house that evening. Peter takes her to the basement, where he has a collection of priceless musical instruments. There, he finally kisses her and takes her to his bedroom. Meanwhile, Sid is performing a show where Joe appears again. He asks Sid to remember the numbers 16, 21, and 12. After having a shower, Sandra is talking to Peter about their romantic evening when Peter decides to cook dinner for her. While he's downstairs, Sandra looks through the room. He finds a photo album and a picture of a short-haired brunette lady. Peter says that it's his late mother who used to run away with lovers all the time. The next day, Sid tells her about what Joe said. Sandra thinks the numbers are a combination for Peter's music room. When she gets back home, Vivian shows her the flowers that Peter sent. He also invited her to a party. At the party, Sid is again performing magic tricks. Sandra tells him to try the combination while she accompanies Peter. Sid goes downstairs, and after thinking a lot, he remembers the combination and enters the room. However, Peter's butler locks the door from outside. After a while, Sandra goes to check on him, and she opens the door for him. They're looking around the room when they hear Peter coming downstairs, so they get out and say that they were just admiring the cellar. Later that night, Sandra wakes up and goes to the music room while Peter is asleep. She looks around and finds tarot cards there, even though Peter told her that he doesn't like superstitious things. By the time Peter wakes up, Sandra is back in the bedroom. Sandra tells Sid about the cards, and he's certain about Peter's guilt, but Sandra still wants solid proof. She meets Peter again on her birthday, and he gives her a beautiful gift. He explains how he has to go out of town for a couple of days, but he'll celebrate her birthday on his return. Sandra tells all of this to Sid, who offers to take her out that evening. While she's getting ready, Joe appears in her room and warns her not to get too close to Peter. He still believes Peter to be a murderer, but Sandra doesn't agree with him. That evening, she's having dinner at an Indian restaurant with Sid when she spots Peter outside. He lied to her, and she wants to know why. So they both chase him, but pretty soon they lose sight of Peter. Sandra is wondering why Peter lied to her when they hear a woman screaming. A woman was strangled to death in a nearby building. The next day, they read in the newspaper that the victim was a prostitute and had short black hair like every other victim of the tarot card killer. There was even a tarot card at the scene. At this point, Sandra decides to meet the editor of a national newspaper to discuss everything. The editor explains how all the evidence against Peter is circumstantial. He makes it clear that they need irrefutable proof to print a serious allegation against a powerful guy like Peter. To make things worse, he also tells them that the tarot card killer was caught by the police, and it was some local handyman with psychological issues. This meeting makes Sandra happy because she can now get closer to Peter, but she also wants to tell him about her true identity. So, that evening, as they take a walk in his estate, she tries to confess it, but Peter stops her. He wants to confess too, and says that he lied to her about going on a meeting because he was meeting a sensitive client. This puts Sandra at ease, and she confesses how she was investigating him alongside Sid. She's worried about Peter's reaction, but he's amused by her actions. He's really understanding and wants to continue their relationship. He even explains how he bought the tarot cards as a present for Sandra. A few days later, Sandra is having lunch with Sid, and she tells him about Peter's confession. But Sid has a new theory. He shows her the note that he took out from Peter's bag. It says Betty G. The woman who died on Sandra's birthday was called Elizabeth Gibson, nicknamed Betty G. He believes that Betty had a relationship with Peter, and he wanted to get rid of her. So he murdered her in the same way as the serial killer to hide his crime. However, this theory is really sketchy, and Sandra doesn't want to hear it. That evening, Joe visits Sid and tells him that he's leaving this earth for good. He wants Sid to take care of Sandra because Peter might still be dangerous. So Sid goes to Betty's apartment, and after interviewing some neighbors, he finds out that her name really was Betty G. He also learns that she was blonde, but she had a rich client named Peter who asked her to color her hair black. He instantly calls Sandra, who is at Peter's country estate. Peter listens to their conversation on the other phone. After hearing about it, Sandra tells Sid to stop this nonsense because she still thinks that Peter is innocent. To get the final evidence, Sid decides to get Peter's tarot cards. While she's looking, he goes into the music room to look for cards. He doesn't find any cards, but does find a key. While he's leaving, the maid catches him. He quickly gets out of the apartment to test another theory. The maid, on the other hand, tells Peter about Sid's behavior. Peter is worried, but doesn't say anything to Sandra. Meanwhile, Sid tries to open the door to Betty's place with the key he found, and to his horror, the door opens. He is now certain of Peter's guilt and quickly gets on the road to save Sandra. While he's driving, Sandra is enjoying a boat ride with Peter. There, he finally tells her the truth. He admits to being Betty's client. He also admits to being her murderer because she was blackmailing him. He tells Sandra how he will drown her and later on murder Sid to clear his name. She starts screaming, but there's no one for miles, and Peter pushes her into the lake. After she goes underwater, he goes back to his house and calls the police, claiming that Sandra drowned in a boating accident. Sid, on the other hand, is driving really fast and gets into an accident. When the police arrive at Peter's house, he's telling them how Sandra died because she couldn't swim. Just then, Sandra walks into the room and tells him how she's a prolific swimmer and just lied to him. A few days later, the editor applauds Sandra for her investigation of Peter. She decides to credit the story to Joe, and also Sid, who died in that accident. The film ends with Sid performing tricks for other dead people in the afterlife.